What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Bowl Season 5, Episode 1, My Corona. Shame on you for stealing the joke that I made well, actually, yeah, it has been years now, because for some reason they're still trying to say we're in danger. It's coming back because, well, it's the election season, so we gotta be worried, guys. I could get into my whole political debacle and all this stuff that the people in charge are trying to use, but, it's fine. It's whatever. I don't care. I do care, but I'm not going to bring it up here. No, as far as this episode is concerned, though, a little weird. I will say I'm glad they didn't go the same route that NCIS did when they first had their first episode post-COVID, which was very much like oh, guys, wear the mask, do all your hand sanitizer and stuff, social distance, don't talk to me, put the mask. Like, it was very much almost a PSA from the CDC and all the politicians who wanted to make sure that we were following the rules and we were doing what we were told, because if we're not, well, you're just a rebel and you don't care about other people's lives and all that BS. I'm glad I didn't see that here. It definitely felt much more in the line of, this is something that happened, let's see how it would affect our characters. Now, granted, that's not really what this was about, because ultimately a lot of the stuff that was being shown in this episode and was being talked about, them having to deal with it, was all a part of Bull's dream while he was sick. So, yeah, I don't really get that. Like, it would have made a lot more sense if we spent this episode maybe seeing what adjustments were happening and how the team was going to adjust to it, rather than, oh, this is what Bull thinks is going to happen and how are they going to adjust to this stuff and it's going to be so difficult. So I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about that part of it. It being all just a dream and stuff. But overall, it was fine. The lip syncing scenes were definitely a very odd part. I wasn't really sure what was going on with it. I thought maybe he was going a little crazy from the lack of sleep, between Astrid and just kind of, I guess, the anxiety of not being sure if he was going to be able to keep the business open and all that. So the fact that it turned out to just be like oh no, this is all part of his dream, and he just randomly breaks into lip syncing a song. Okay, sure. But no, as the case itself, I really felt like would have been interesting to tackle on its own. Just this idea that, well, I mean, the service, yes, it's their fault, but it also is a good thing. It's there to help as well. So it's kind of that moral gray area of, well, do we, blame them for all the bad stuff, the families that are clearly being hurt by it, or do we keep them around because clearly they are doing a good job of essentially keeping the people who might bring a neighborhood down, or the criminals and the crime rate going up. They do a good job of helping in that respect. It's kind of an interesting moral debacle. And it's definitely one of those, I mean, there's a lot of systems in our society that both help and hurt. You look at, like, unemployment. Yes, it helps whenever you get fired from a job and you need something to keep you essentially okay and above water, but also there are a lot of people that will take advantage of it, and essentially, we're paying taxes for somebody to just sort of mooch off the government and not have to do anything. So there's always a good and a bad for a lot of systems like this. And it always sort of is a question of how do we try to improve the system to still help the people who need it without essentially hurting other people, or sometimes helping the people who don't need it and spending money on people who don't need it. So yeah, it was one that I wish we could have actually seen a real episode about, and maybe even have some of the team going through something similar where maybe a system like this one hurt them in the past. It was the system's fault. It was a mistake, but it was still a mistake that hurt, and kind of see how it could affect other people. But again, like the one woman who clearly she went through a lot of trouble to get an apartment, but now she's in a good one, and not only that, but the same system that hurt her is now helping this area that she's living in currently. The apartment building she's living in with her 9-year-old daughter. So, yeah, I don't know. I wish we had seen more of it, but other than that, the episode was perfectly fine. It was a nice little moment to see, like, the team back together, I guess. For me personally, I mean, it is one of those, I look at it, and having been working on set since COVID happened, I do look at that and I'm like, well, a lot of that stuff is still in place, even a couple years later, which is kind of stupid, but you know what? If they want to be like, no, we care about people, which is why we're keeping all these strict rules in place, and if that's how they want to justify all of these stupid rules, then good on them, I guess. Go ahead and virtue signal. That's perfectly fine. You have that right. You can do that. But the other thing that I will say that I figured would probably happen, because I don't know, most shows that, granted, I've only seen these two that have tackled the COVID debacle. Um, there's something about it that I'm like, you guys, you do wear masks, right? Like, you have a lot of people wearing masks on set. Basically, everybody except for the actors wear masks. How can you not know the problems that come with masks? Because at NCIS and in this one, same exact thing. Nobody has any problem understanding somebody who's wearing a mask, which I can tell you is definitely not the case. And also for the women, how is their makeup still pristine? You know, like, you have to have some women on set who are wearing masks and don't wear any makeup, right? Because they know there's no point. Because they're all sitting there eating at the table, and I see Marissa with, like, the bright red lipstick on. I'm like, okay, no. First of all, you're eating, so that lipstick should be gone. And second of all, you've been wearing a mask this whole time, so that lipstick should be gone. I'm just like, come on, guys. Like, again, you've been around people wearing masks. You know the problems that come with it. Please don't ignore them. Please don't act like, oh no, guys, it's perfectly fine. We can go out with no trouble whatsoever wearing these things. Stop trying to convince us it's a good thing and it's okay to wear. Like, we all know it sucks. And granted, sometimes we have to do it because that's what the job requires. But it's almost like they just want to make it seem like, oh no, it's fine. See, all of these women still look so good even after wearing a mask, and you can too. Oh man, it's just kind of funny to me. But anyways, we'll see how much this affects the rest of the season. I don't really know if every episode is going to come up with a new sort of issue for them to deal with because of some of the rules that were and maybe still are. I don't really know what the rules are in New York. I know they were one of the strictest as far as the lockdown and all the regulations and stuff. Which of course they also had some of the highest numbers of cases too. So yeah, just gonna go ahead and throw that little number in there, but. You know, they still work though. The regulations, the lockdown, they still work. The masks definitely still work. So just keep doing it. If you still are 2 years later, just keep doing it. You're good. Anyways, that's it for this first episode. On to the next one. I'll see you there. And now episode 2, The Great Divide. So this one was pretty fun. I like the whole Bulls team basically being pitted against each other. You have Bull and Chunk and Taylor on one side, and then you got Benny and Marissa and Danny on the other side. It was a good setup. You know, I liked kind of the different sides to each argument, the different points of view on each side. I thought it was a good setup, and I really like how it came to a conclusion as well. Because I feel like most people looking at this situation would probably feel how I did about it, which is, I feel bad for the girl. Because it's not like she intentionally did any of this. It's not like it was entirely her fault. Yes, she was the one responsible for bringing people here, but it was with good intentions. And it's not like she could really do anything about the building itself. So yes, there is some responsibility on her side, but this rich woman, who is the mother of one of the girls that died, is trying to get her to pay her more money. Like, that for me is where I'm kind of like, okay, I'm more on the is she the defendant? Is the plaintiff and I don't know. But I feel for the Lily girl. Like, I'm more on her side in that scenario, just because you don't need any more money. And it's not like this girl's going to be able to pay you anyways. So she's basically just trying to make somebody pay for what happened to her daughter, which was ultimately an accident. And yes, there is some responsibility on Lily's side, but she's going to be feeling that for the rest of her life. Like, she's probably going to be feeling guilty for what happened. Not only did she bring all these people here to try to help, but also, what we find out later, her switching the beds, I mean, that's going to rack her guilt for the rest of her life. That's payment plenty. But of course, again, she just wants somebody to blame. She wants to point fingers at somebody and say, it's all your fault now. You have to pay for it. So it is definitely a lot easier, I feel like, to feel sorry for Lily than it is to feel sorry for, I think her name was Evelyn. So, but in that case, it still did come to a nice resolution where, yes, technically, because of what happened, she's liable, but the jury clearly felt bad for her and felt similar to probably how I did, and just like, okay, but she's not really, like, what this woman is asking for is not what this girl has to pay. Like, it's not what she deserves to pay based on what happened. So, like, yeah, she's liable for $1. That was thunder. I don't know if you heard that. But I thought that was a nice ending and kind of like a hey, to the woman who's asking for all this money even though she doesn't need more. So I like that ending, and I feel like just seeing the back and forth, seeing Benny, pulling out his usual tricks, seeing Chunk having to deal with those tricks and also trying to use those against him as well. It's kind of how I expected it to go. Chunk was, I think, more on the right side, so it's how the case was likely going to end up, even without Benny looking into it. So I feel like how it ended up is normally how it would, but I feel like Benny really brought about a little bit more than most people would have. Like, I don't think most attorneys would have been able to get the jury to find Lily liable, but he's good enough to at least get that point, but he just wasn't good enough, which honestly it's kind of the truth of the whole situation. The facts of the matter are she doesn't deserve to have to pay that much. So I feel like it was always going to be a tough ask for him to actually get what Evelyn was looking for in this case. The back and forth was definitely really good. There's definitely a couple weird moments with it, like the whole Western duel thing. I feel like that would have worked a lot better if they were actually in the courtroom and they were like passing each other to talk to a witness or something. But to do it in TAC, it was just kind of like a weird, why would he stop and look back at him like that? It was just odd. It was funny, but it was odd. There was also a really funny line, I almost forgot about this, from the judge herself. I liked the judge in this case. She was very impartial. She got angry with both of them. It wasn't like she was against one side or the other. But I really like the moment where Evelyn decides to ask Benny to be her attorney. And so they go and meet in the judge's quarters about it. She's like, what about the other man that you had today? She's like, well, he just wasn't good enough, or he wasn't the best, and I believe Mr. Cologne is. And the reaction from the judge, I want to believe it was ad-libbed, because the timing, it was so realistic. Just that was subtle. I don't know, something about it just made me laugh. It was perfectly delivered, perfectly timed. Like I said, it seemed very natural, almost like she was just reacting to the line itself. Like, wow, that was subtle. So yeah, that really made me laugh. But final thing to talk about, though, is that final scene with Benny. I don't know if this is going to go anywhere, because I feel like it would be... Well, granted, most shows like this, like Bull, like NCIS, like Criminal Minds, when you have your team, the team can change throughout the seasons. Sometimes characters will not be as involved as they normally are, or sometimes characters will leave and new characters will get introduced. So there's always that feeling of you're never quite sure what stories to take seriously and what stories are just kind of there to be like, oh no, are they gonna leave? Are they done? Are they getting fired? Or whatever the case. So in this case, Benny getting asked to run for the district attorney of New York, it's a big step for him for sure, and I feel like it's a great opportunity. But it's one of those, is he actually going to go do that? Because if so, then obviously he's not going to be working at TAC anymore. So the question is he going to go do that? And if so, will he still be on the show, or is he going to be doing his own thing? Maybe they'll go up against him sometimes. Obviously, Bull still parenting a child with his sister is still a big thing, and they're best friends, so I doubt they would just kick him off the show. But it would be interesting to see what would happen in the scenario where he does go become the district attorney. Like, how would he be helping Bull at all? Would there be still some camaraderie? Would they be butting heads a lot? I don't know. It's definitely piqued my interest to see what they're going to do with it, and whether they decide to follow through with it, or whether he decides to stay at TAC. But I do think this episode showed, if Benny does decide to take this job, obviously Chunk, he has learned a lot from Benny, and I think he's willing to step up and take this position at TAC as the attorney. Which honestly is kind of interesting, because we've not really seen Chunk do his what he's normally been doing at TAC, which is the fashion side of things. Making sure the defense or the defendants or whoever they're representing, trying to make sure that they look the part, so that the jury has a favorable view of them. I don't think he's done that since he started studying law. So I do feel like this would be a good step, just so Chunk doesn't feel kind of pointless to the team at times. But I don't know. We'll see. But 2 episodes in, and yeah, I mean, even in spite of the COVID stuff, which I'm still kind of like, I don't like being reminded of it, but it's there, but it's not like it's beating you over the head with it. And obviously, I don't like talking about it. I don't like remembering it. But this show is at least giving me enough on the outside. It's giving me a good enough story and good enough characters that I can put up with it. I'm not sitting here bashing my head in with the story that they're writing, and then also like, oh god, and they're talking about COVID too, like NCIS was doing. Yeah, we'll see how the rest of the season goes, but so far so good. On to episode 3. I'll see you there. And finally, episode 3, Prison Break. So this one was also pretty good. I liked kind of all the different moving pieces of trying to find out how they can essentially get the people to see what this guard was doing. It did end up being a little simplistic in just the fact that, like, oh, there's one van that Danny didn't check, and that just happened to have the evidence she was looking for. So a little coincidental, a little simplistic in its conclusion, but I thought it was fine. The one issue I do have with it, though, is this whole thing with Marissa and the guy that she apparently used to have a crush on. I like what they're doing with Marissa, just in kind of what she's going through. It's still not really getting a lot of focus, and I do wonder if at some point we will see this case go to court, maybe with the TAC team behind her. But it is interesting, and I was very surprised that we didn't wrap it up last season. Like, it's still ongoing, that her husband, who she's trying to divorce, is being a pain about a lot of the stuff they're going through. He's just apparently not really signing papers. I don't really know the whole story of what's going on. I feel like they've left a lot of it vague, but we can clearly at least see that she wants the divorce, and he either doesn't want it or is at least trying to slow down the process and be difficult at every turn. So I hope we get to see more of it, because it's something that it is interesting, and it does give Marissa some more depth because she has to deal with this. But her story in this episode, seeing this guy apparently she used to go to high school with, it was fine. It was kind of that initial, like, oh crap, she knows him, like, what do we do? Is there a conflict of interest there? If they find out, what could happen? But ultimately, she hasn't talked to him in years, so it seems fine. And then she starts talking about it halfway through the episode, and it's just like, oh, I just remember he was so nice, and he used to drive me to school every day, and even though he was 2 years ahead of me, like, he was a nice guy, and I don't know. I'm just like, okay, so this is going to be the problem then. Like, clearly there's something there. I don't know exactly what, but there's going to be something where, I honestly thought it was going to be something where he finds out about her, like he just sort of casually stumbles upon her. But the way they make it happen is really stupid to me, because first of all, she gets on, like, this website of one of those, like, you can catch up with your old classmates apparently. And so she gets on to her class's website. And so he immediately messages her, like, hey, you're finally on here, huh? So 2 things. One is pretty major, and the other one is really major. First one, he was 2 years ahead of her. So unless this website just has everybody that went to that high school ever, which in that case, how is it possible that he's just like, oh yeah, there she is, she finally joined. I'll get to that second point in a second. But yeah, most of the time those websites, they're meant to be just your class. Like, I graduated in 2012, so I would join a website and I would be a part of Pike County High School 2012. Like, that would be my thing. So the fact that she gets on and he's also on there tells me that they either don't know how these websites work, the writers, or this is a different type of website that just absolutely is completely different, and somehow everybody that went to this high school ever is on this page, which doesn't make any sense, because that website would be just bursting at the seams because so many people are trying to log on to it. The second thing that's a problem, he just immediately messages her as soon as she gets on. As soon as she gets on, it's an instant, oh, hey, Marissa, you're finally on here. It took you a while, didn't it? First of all, is he just like watching every day waiting for her to get on? And if not, it sends an alert to everybody, hey, Marissa Morgan just joined. Does it do it every single time somebody joins the page? Because if so, that would get annoying real fast. And also, just immediate message is one thing if he's watching, that's already kind of creepy, but to immediately message her, that's very creepy. And they're just treating it as like, oh, isn't he sweet? He even sends her a letter. It's like, hey, I never really forgot about those times I would drive you to school. Like, it's one thing to be like, oh, hey, it's been a while, like, how you been? But the way that he does it is almost like he was waiting for her to join this website. He was waiting for the chance to talk to her again. And, well, yeah, if he's a good guy, then maybe it's just one of those things where, because I'll admit there are times you just sort of think back on the past and you're just like, oh man, I remember those days. Those days were good. I wish I could go back to those times. So maybe it is one of those coincidental things where he does fondly remember those days of high school. He does fondly remember her driving her to school, and maybe he just doesn't have anybody in his life. And he's like, if I ever got a chance at that again, I'd give it a shot. And so when this chance pops up, even if it is a little creepy that he just happened to be on the website as soon as she joined, and again, whether he got a notification, whether it just popped up on the page and he was on it at that time, the fact that he instantly messaged her is kind of like, okay, you can ease into it, dude. You don't just throw yourself right in there. I don't know. It came off as a little creepy, a little weird. And then even like in the judge's chamber, like, I don't know, very naive as well. Like, well, I'd like to think I can be impartial. But, if you know Marissa Morgan, then I just can't imagine that the person she's representing would be telling a lie, because she's just a very honest person. That is the definition of being... Is it impartial? Of being partial. Of being biased. You're letting your feelings and your idea of her affect what you think about the person she's representing. Numbnuts. You don't say that unless you expect to get yourself thrown off the jury. So I don't know. It seemed kind of silly, and it seems also a little coincidental that Marissa just so happens to bump into this guy again that she kind of had a crush on all the way back in high school, right after she's dealing with this whole thing where she's trying to get a divorce from her current husband. Like, it's a little too perfectly timed, and also the fact that he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I saw you were married. How much research did he do on her? I'm a little creeped out, honestly. So I don't know, maybe that'll get better, but there were definitely some issues that I had with this story that I feel like they either didn't do a good enough job of, I guess, researching these types of websites, or, I don't know, maybe they just wrote it too quickly. Whatever the case, clearly there are some problems here as far as the setup and as far as how it was supposed to be perceived, because based on how the music was and based on her facial expressions, it's supposed to be seen as like, aw, isn't that sweet? Like, he still remembers her after all this time, and still possibly something there, and isn't this just going to be sweet? And I sort of saw it as, okay, this dude was like ready for you. He was waiting for you to join this website. That's some red flags there. I'd be a little concerned if I were you, Marissa. But whatever the case, I think that's about it. The stuff with Benny is still progressing a little bit. He does plan to run for the district attorney. They did show Bull had a little bit of a initial reaction of, I'm not sure, which I do think it makes sense, because one, he's best friends with him, so he doesn't really want him to go working somewhere else because he enjoys working with him. Two, business-wise, he doesn't want to lose Benny as an attorney because Benny is still one of the best. Like, Chunk's obviously showing he's got the capability to handle himself, but Benny is just one of those guys, he doesn't even need Bull to handle a case. Chunk is still kind of at the point where Bull will need to step in at times and sort of give him a little bit of a nudge in the right direction, because he can get a little lost in himself. And that's just because he's young, he's still learning, he's still figuring things out. But the other big thing is just he kind of sees this district attorney position as more of a politician job. And I can kind of see his point of like, Benny's not really a politician. So he doesn't feel like he'd be a good fit. Now, granted, I do think that we need to stop putting politicians into politics, like into political seats, because I think most of us can agree politicians are the worst. In fact, wasn't until 2016 that suddenly politicians were seen as anything but just criminals and liars. And suddenly in 2016, they all teamed up because they didn't like the guy who was sitting in the top seat. And suddenly everybody was like, oh, well, we believe the politicians now. Don't know how that happened, but, it is what it is. But yeah, so I can see if I had somebody that I knew and I trusted and I really liked as a friend, and I saw that they were going for a position in a political seat, there would be that concern for me. Like, are they going to be okay? Is this something they can handle? Is this something that they're going to do well at? I'd love to see somebody I could trust in a seat like that, but one, is it going to corrupt them? And two, are they even going to make a dent in this machine of our government right now? Because there is so much buying your way into it and so much you got to know the right people to sort of get you a little further ahead, know a few people in the media as well to kind of up your chances and make you look like you're a positive type of person. So yeah, I do get it. I do understand Bull's point of view, and I feel like they really played it off, at least, the one scene where we see him and Izzy in bed. I feel like it was a little weird to play it off like Izzy's getting all upset at him, like, why don't you want him to go for this? Like, I feel like it was kind of understood. I understood why he wouldn't want him to. So the fact that they had to have him lay it out, I just felt like Izzy would be a little bit more understanding than that. But, it wasn't too bad. And again, I don't really know what to expect. I don't know if Benny's going to end up winning. I don't know what this is going to do. Like, is him running going to affect something at TAC? I'm not sure. But I like the change. I like that there's going to be something a little bit different this season. It's not just going to be the team constantly tackling cases and Benny's always the one in there with Bull, and that's sort of it. There is going to be a lot of different things happening this season. Obviously, with the COVID restrictions and stuff and some of the stuff they have to deal with in that respect, it feels like it's going to be a different challenge for him throughout this season. And now that Benny has eyes elsewhere on a job, I think it sets up for possibly some friction, possibly he's not fully focused. Maybe there's going to be a case where his mind sort of wanders and he forgets something. I don't know. I think they've set up for a good overarching story as far as our characters are concerned for this season. So, with all that being said, that's it for the first 3 episodes. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on the first 3? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future bowl reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.